And generally speaking, in relationships, we're constantly trying to fix that relationship from our past that was never resolved. So if you have a parent who is emotionally unavailable, you may find yourself naturally attracted to emotionally unavailable people, and it's subconscious. You don't think about it. It's not like you say, "Ooh, he's emotionally unavailable. Let me go for him." It's more of you just naturally gravitate to those types, and it's because deep, deep, deep down inside, your inner child is trying to fix what they didn't have with either their emotionally unavailable mother or father. So once you're aware of the type, and I love the example you gave about writing down all of your past relationships, it helps you to understand why you make the decisions that you make and then figure out, what do I need to do differently?
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Legacy Speaks. My name is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and emotional wellness coach. Today, we're going to have another amazing conversation with another amazing clinician, and her name is Dr. Dyona Augustin, and she is the founder of, well, actually one of the co-founders of the mental health Sistas down in South Florida, my hometown. Yes, y'all. So I'm so excited for this conversation. And before we dive right in, I need you to hit that subscription button below. That way you can stay up to date on newly released content on a regular basis. So Dr. Dyona, can you let the people know who you are and more about your practice and all things you?
All right. Well, first of all, Sierra, thank you so much for having me on. It is a pleasure to be here as a part of Legacy Speaks. My name is Dr. Dyona, as you already mentioned. I'm a psychologist working in South Florida alongside my sister, Dr. Jo, who is also a psychologist. And we have a heart for people in our community, especially women, minorities, people of color. And we basically just wanted to do whatever we could to ensure that everyone in our community has access to culturally competent and effective care. So we have our private practice. It's called Augustin and Augustin Psychology, where we do therapy. We also have a Step Up Psych, which is my sister's private practice that does specifically testing. And then we also started an organization called the Mental Health Sistas. And that was because we really wanted to see our sisters in the Black, Caribbean, other communities take care of themselves, take care of their mental health, so that they can present their best selves to the community and also remember to always take care of themselves as well. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have this conversation because it's so multi-layered. One, you already know Legacy Speaks is all about shedding light on not only mental health concerns, but mental health solutions. Mm-hmm. It's one thing for us to talk about it in terms of like mental health awareness and advocacy, but the people really do need like practical and tangible tips and strategies to be able to navigate their concerns, specifically within the Black and Brown community. And so thank you so much for the work that you and your sisters are doing. And so I'm just super excited for this conversation. I know I know we've had talks previously before in terms of like expertise and all that jazz. And one of the things that really stood out to me with the work that you do is focusing on like assertiveness training and boundaries, which is so important, especially in the mental health journey, because we can do all of this inner work. But if we don't know how to effectively protect the work that we've done thus far, then all of that stuff goes out the window. And so can you explain how do you help clients work through the boundary setting and the navigation of being assertive, because there's a lot of misconception when it comes to being assertive and protective of one's wellness journey?
So I think one of the first things we have to do is help the person to understand where do they start and end, and where does the other person start and end? Because especially in our community, we tend to be caretakers. We tend to be people pleasers. So we get used to looking out for any and everyone and trying to make sure we meet everyone's needs. But in the process, we tend to neglect our own. So when it comes to boundary setting and assertiveness training, with regards to boundary setting, it's all about helping the person to figure out What do you need to do to protect not only your mental health, but protect your time, protect your space, protect yourself physically, psychologically, mentally? And then the assertiveness part is all about helping you to feel comfortable to express what you're really thinking and feeling, because sometimes we get into the habit of not really being honest about what's really going on in our head because we don't want to offend, or we don't want to hurt people's feelings, or we don't want to let people down. And in the process, we let ourselves down. So I'm all about the blend of setting boundaries, but then also learning how to express yourself in an assertive rather than aggressive or passive manner.
Oh, I love that process. And for anybody who thoroughly enjoyed it, please make sure that you're writing these nuggets down and tagging Dr. Dyona at her social media as well as Legacy Speaks, because there was a lot to unpack right there, right? Like you mentioned, we have a way of trying to figure out how our messaging is going to be received by the other individual. We're trying to figure out, am I saying it right? Will this change our relationship dynamic after this? There's a lot of what ifs when it comes to boundary setting and remaining assertive. And so thank you so much for addressing all of like the inner dialogue that goes along with this process.
Yeah.
Hey, lovely. Shout out to you because I know mental and emotional wellness is important to you. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. But lean in really quickly because I know sometimes it's really hard to create a plan and actually sticking to it. So let's take your mental health to another level. Ever wonder what keeps you from fully executing? Ever wonder how you can build the confidence for decision making? Well, guess what? You're not alone and I'm here to help. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com for your free mental health plan. It'll give you practical strategies for addressing your current mental health needs. But first, you got to tap in. So head over to mentalhealthgoals.com to receive your free mental health action plan today. Do it right now. mentalhealthgoals.com. See you soon.
And you definitely made an important point there, Sierra. One of the things I tell my clients whenever they talk about what the other person is going to think, I tell them that's none of your business. You cannot control what other people think and feel. Everybody is responsible for their own thoughts and feelings. So stop making decisions based on what this person may think or feel.
Absolutely. And learning to trust yourself and the other person's capacity to be able to handle what it is that you have to say. I always tell clients, it's enough for you to try to work through your own thoughts, for you to take on the responsibility of somebody else's thoughts. That's just too much. Just stop it.
Too much.
Absolutely. So let's kind of dive into one of the things that happens to come up a lot for clients, which is relationship building, whether it be from a romantic perspective or maybe even a platonic perspective. Can we speak on the concept of what it looks like to be able to form healthy relationships? And what is this whole concept of like our type? Is there a type that we need to be looking for?
That's a very good question. So when it comes to building relationships, I think I normally see two extremes, not just with regards to clients, but even with family and friends. We have one group who thinks they're not ready for a relationship, so they actively avoid it and work on themselves. We have another group who thinks they're overly ready for a relationship and can't figure out why they haven't met someone. I always tell people you are never going to be 100% ready for a relationship. You're always going to be learning and growing in the relationship. The most important thing is to do the inner work, especially the child work, if there are things from your past that currently impact you in the present, so that you can bring your best self forward in a relationship. And then when it comes to dating our type, the reality is, even if we may not think we have a type, generally speaking, we do gravitate to a specific type. And a lot of times when people hear type, they think a physical type, a certain height, a certain weight, a certain bank balance, a certain job, a certain car. But there's also the emotional type, which is about what do you gravitate to emotionally? Do you go for the person who is emotionally unavailable? Do you go for the person who is emotionally needy? Do you go for the person who won't commit? Like figuring out what is your type and then figuring out, is that working for me? Or is it actually keeping me from my goal of having a relationship or friendship, as it were?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love the way that you broke that down because I feel like a lot of people are trying to figure out what type they are and can they be somebody else's type
Mm-hmm.
as well. And is my type even out there? And so when we're talking about the concept of like that emotional type, like what are the benefits of making that a priority, especially when we're trying to figure out ways to develop healthy relationships with other people?
So I think that's a great question. And when it comes to our emotional type, if you don't know what your type is, you may not notice if it's something you have to change. So what usually happens is I'll talk to a friend, a family member, or a client, and every relationship they have the same complaints. So then I start to wonder if you're having the same complaints, there's something about you that is gravitating to these types, and then asking them, what is it that drew you to your partner? Or what is it that made you think this person would be a good friend or a good best friend? And then figuring out what are the patterns and how does that tie back to either past childhood traumas or your upbringing? So that's the reason that it's important. If you don't know what your emotional type is, you will basically be dating blind. And then every time you encounter the same problem, you have no idea how you got there.
Absolutely. The way that you described it, I appreciate because it's like literally slowing down and kind of like pulling out
Mm-hmm.
your record of all your relationships. That's something that I personally had
Yes.
to do in therapy. I
Mhm.
I went to my therapist and I wrote down every single person that I either dated, had a situationship with, or maybe
Mm.
even attempted to talk to. And like when I wrote
Mhm.
each person down, I wrote down like the nature of the relationship, the outcome of the relationship, lessons that I learned, and some of the things that they were exhibiting in the relationship. And I was able to
Mhm.
recognize like I'm one of those people who are attracted to emotionally unavailable people. And then that helped me to identify
Mm.
where did that come from? Obviously, parent related stuff, and then you get an opportunity to dive into like not only like childhood trauma, but maybe even lessons
Mhm.
that you didn't even pay attention to growing up. So y'all, I'm telling y'all, listen to Dr. Dyona because she is on it. Like those patterns are so
Mhm.
important.
It's true, and even the example you use is one of the most common ones I've encountered. I have a parent like that. I know a lot of people who have a parent like that. And generally speaking, in relationships, we're constantly trying to fix that relationship from our past that was never resolved. So if you have a parent who is emotionally unavailable, you may find yourself naturally attracted to emotionally unavailable people, and it's subconscious. You don't think about it. It's not like you say, "Ooh, he's emotionally unavailable. Let me go for him." It's more of you just naturally gravitate to those types. And it's because deep, deep, deep down inside, your inner child is trying to fix what they didn't have with either their emotionally unavailable mother or father. So once you're aware of the type, and I love the example you gave about writing down all of your past relationships, it helps you to understand why you make the decisions that you make and then figure out what do I need to do differently.
Hey y'all, it's Sierra. Make sure you head over to shoplegacysbks.com to check out the latest gear. As always, we have the classic therapy is dope, crew neck, as well as tees. So head over to cop your crew neck today. It comes in heather navy, that cardinal red, as well as that beautiful gold that we love to see. So head over to purchase yours, not only for yourself, but also for a friend as well. And we are offering free shipping right now. So head over to shoplegacysbks.com to cop all of your therapy's dope gear and check out all the other additional merch as well.
Absolutely. Y'all, please take a page out of my book because I had to learn that I'm this perfectionistic overachiever, wanting to win the love of people and all that jazz. So please do the work, okay,
Mm-hmm.
y'all?
Yep.
Is it fair, speaking of doing the work, is it
Mm-hmm.
fair for us to have expectations for the other individual, especially when it comes to like our romantic partners, to do
Mm-hmm.
the inner work if we haven't done the inner work ourselves, especially when we're talking about finding our types?
Is it fair? No. Is it human? Yes. So the reality is, it's not fair in the sense that, One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was be the person you're trying to attract. So don't just have this long list of qualifications for your partner and then you're just kind of laid back, not doing anything. You want to bring that to the table too. But the reality is, a lot of us, and even I have been guilty of doing that, have, tried to have specific expectations for a relationship, even if we ourselves aren't necessarily there or haven't necessarily met that criteria. So one of the things I always tell people is don't be afraid to do the work. Not only because it's so beneficial for your relationship to do the work, it also helps to know yourself because then that pours into self-love and self-acceptance. And if you haven't learned how to love and accept yourself, how can you expect someone else to do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that I remind clients to do is like, especially when they're jumping into or entering into a new relationship, is to look at it as an opportunity to learn more about yourself in relation to other people. I have a client right now who is extremely guarded, and obviously like she's trying to bypass some of the pain that she hasn't had an opportunity to unpack in previous relationship. And so I always take on the concept of like, what if, or like, what's next? This has happened and we can't change it. But here are opportunities for you to like build that muscle of resiliency, for you to get an opportunity to learn more about yourself, and for you to say, you know what, I did it. Did it kill me? No. Did it hurt a little bit? Yeah, but I'm okay. And I can move forward with exploring myself in this new way, in this new setting.
I love that. It's so important that we reflect on the past, but we don't live there. So you're kind of facilitating her being present oriented because while she can't change what happened to her, she can change what she does from here on out.
Absolutely. That data from the past is so important. And because we like to keep it in a closet or maybe even put it in a box and never revisit it. But like you mentioned, we don't have to stay there. We just go back to it as an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and not learn more about ourselves in a way to like convict us or like beat ourselves over the head or like, I told you so, this happened last time, because, we can use old experiences and beat ourselves up, but we can leverage that as a reference point. Yeah. There was something
That's
that
true.
you mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. There was something that you mentioned in terms of like the list. And immediately when I thought about that, I thought about the old dating show for Chili from TLC, when she was like dating on MTV and she had this entire list and her matchmaker was like, girl, what in the world is going on? And as of right now, in this season of her life, she's found love like a couple years later after the show. But immediately I thought about that whole list that she had. And oftentimes, especially as Black women or maybe even Black men, we have a list that we have entering into these relationships. That the person, like you mentioned, has to look a certain way, be a certain way, act a certain way. They need to show up a certain way. It's great to go in with expectations and standards, but when is it overboard? Like, when does it become overboard? And how does that impact our ability to effectively and genuinely connect with other people?
So when it becomes overboard, I think is when our list is not just deal breakers. It's things that we could learn to live with, but we want to just be comfortable, so we choose the easy way. So for example, when a person comes to me with a list, I'll actually tell them, you know what, go ahead, write down every single thing you want in your spouse, future spouse. When they finally finish the list, I'll tell them, go through and figure out what are absolute deal breakers where you absolutely cannot be with someone who does X. And generally speaking, what happens is they recognize a lot of those things aren't deal breakers. They're just things that they don't necessarily like or want. So when you have too many things on the list, what you do is you narrow the dating pool even more. And Sierra, I don't know your relationship status, but the dating pool right now is very, very small. So everything you add to that list is just making it smaller, 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 smaller. And then in addition to that, when I see clients, especially women of color, they usually have a preference in terms of race or ethnic background. So that dating pool is already small. So when you add a huge list, you make it even smaller. So I always do recommend, if someone does have a list, really review it with a fine tooth comb to figure out, are there things on here that really are not non-negotiables or deal breakers? Take those off the list so that you can actually increase your chances of meeting the right person. And the right person doesn't mean they'll be perfect. What it means is that they will be right for you and that you guys can both make adjustments as necessary to make it work.
Absolutely. I think about like progress and not perfection. And it's not to say that you're settling or anything like that, because I'm pretty sure there's somebody listening to you and they're like, you want me to settle? And it's like, no, that's totally not the case. But you want to make sure that you're not cutting out any opportunity to find love or to build genuine connections with other individuals. And even when you were talking about that process, I was just like, wow, one has to be relentlessly honest with yourself. And that's where that component of like assertive communication comes in as well. I know we were referencing it from a place of like communicating to other people, but I'm pretty sure there are some boundaries and maybe even conversations that we have to have with ourselves when it comes to this process.
Oh yeah, for sure. When you talked about being honest with ourselves, that is one of the hardest skills to develop, because the reality is we are constantly lying to ourselves, not knowingly, but to protect our egos. So one of the benefits of actually seeing a therapist is getting to strip away all of the mask and all of the pretending that we're constantly carrying, so that we can be honest with ourselves about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because when you're able to actually see those negative things about yourself and still choose to love and accept yourself, it makes it easier for a friend or a romantic partner to do the same. But when you're not aware of those things and then a partner points it out, we tend to become very defensive, very guarded, as opposed to recognizing this is something we could have worked on when we were still single or worked on with our friends.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing you say is get in the practice of doing the inner work first, because that lays the foundation for you to be able to deal with constructive criticism, to be able to go on that journey with your partner as well. So yeah, get in the practice of doing that inner work as well. Dr. Dyona, I love everything that you said, and I'm pretty sure some of our viewers said this are in agreement as well. Can you let the people know a little bit more about Mental Health Sistas, as well as all things in relation to your blog?
Okay, so when it comes to the Mental Health Sistas, that's just a space where we want people, but especially women of color, to feel safe, to feel valued, and to feel like if they need a resource to take care of themselves, their families, and their mental health, they have an avenue to do so. And to also see my sister and I, not just as psychologists or mental health professionals, but as like a friend or a sister in your head that has gone through a lot of the things that you're currently going through, that struggles just like you struggles, but we're still constantly trying to figure out what do we need to do to better ourselves, better the community at large, and also take care of our mental health. So that's the Mental Health Sistas. And then when it comes to my blog, honestly, I blog because I love to read, I love to write, and I just wanted to provide a space for those people who were feeling stuck to actually see what are the steps that I need to take to get unstuck. Because I have a lot of people who will say, oh, I don't know how to say no. I don't know how to be assertive. I don't know how to pick a partner. I don't know how to manage my feelings. So my blog is just a space where I'll talk about each of those different topics. I like to add a little humor, a little snark, so that it doesn't feel like you're taking medicine or something, but it feels like a friend is talking to you, sharing things that she's learned, because I know what it's like to struggle, and then figuring out what are the steps I need to take to get from point A to point B.
Absolutely. You guys, please head over to drdyona.com where you can tap into all of her resources as well as mentalsisters.com. And Dr. Dyona, can you let the people know how they can find you in other areas? I know I literally just dropped some of your handles, but where are you on Instagram, Twitter, things like that?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Dr. Dyona. That's DRDYONA. And then my sister and I have a joint page called TMHS Official, and that's Instagram and Twitter. So in essence, the Mental Health Sistas, TMHS Official, that's our handle. And then we also have our private practice website, augustinspsychology.com. For all of your therapy or even testing needs, you can check out that website and get in contact with us.
Love it, love it, love it. And before we close out, do you have any closing remarks for anybody who's like, Dr. Dyona, I need some tips. Give me some strategies on how to navigate this crazy dating scene. You already said that this dating pool is a little slim. How do we navigate this space during this time?
Well, the first thing I would say is to know that you're not alone. It is hard out in these dating streets. So it is normal that it's going to take time, that you're going to have to kiss a few frogs or frogettes before you find your prince or princess. And then also, in the meantime, while you're waiting and trying to find that person, work on yourself. And when I say work on yourself, I'm saying use non-judgmental awareness to learn about yourself, to reflect on why you do the things you do and why you think or feel the way you think and feel. Figure out what are the things that you need to work on. What are the wounds or traumas from the past that may be holding you back or keep you from that fulfilling relationship, and then take the steps necessary now to bring your best self to your future relationship.
Oh my goodness, so many keywords. Keyword, a fulfilling relationship. Guys, please aim to do the inner work so that you can have a more fulfilling relationship. Don't just get into a relationship because it's cuffing season. Don't just get into a relationship because you see your friends jumping into relationships as well. Understand that a quality relationship comes from a relationship with yourself first and God. And so please make sure that you are investing in your wellness journey. All right, y'all. Dr. Dyona, as you know, this podcast is the Legacy Speaks podcast. And I always ask this question before we head out. What would you like your legacy to say about you?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would like my legacy to say that I tried my hardest to help people better their lives, not just interpersonally, but psychologically, spiritually, and otherwise.
Oh my goodness, love it. Thank you so much for all of the gems that you dropped. And y'all, if you thoroughly enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you're tapping in with Dr. Dyona as well as at Legacy SBKS on everything. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and definitely stay connected via Legacy SBKS on everything. Stay tuned for the next episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, there'll be a link to another episode. If you're watching this or listening to this on the podcast, make sure that you leave a review. All right, y'all. Once again, thank you so much for connecting, and see you next time.